So we need to talk about the casting of Halle Bailey as Ariel in the upcoming live-action remake of Disney's classic movie, The Little Mermaid. And by talk about her casting, I mean we need to dissect the levels of vitriol that are coming her way as a result of her being cast. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ashley Griffin. I'm a Broadway writer and performer and theater journalist. And I feel like I need to step out and say something about this. So, if you don't know, recently, a couple of days ago, a new trailer dropped for Disney's live action remake. And this was the first trailer to feature Halle Bailey as Ariel. It was the first time we got a chance to see her and hear her singing part of that world. It feels like a lot of the world has kind of lost their mind as a result. The hatred that started getting thrown around as a result of this trailer coming out, it's not new. People have been upset about her casting since the first day it was announced. But it's reached levels that I felt I needed to say something. So here I am. So the backlash to this trailer, as I'm sure you have figured out or already know, is not based on dramaturgical concerns about this upcoming movie. I will be the first to say there are a lot of issues with live action Disney remakes when it comes to the script and the story and the dramaturgy and everything about it. I love Disney films. I almost said I love Disney. The company has changed a lot. I don't know if I can totally say that as a blanket statement anymore, but I'm a Disney Renaissance girl. Their movies have meant a great deal to me. What the company was founded on in terms of the kind of entertainment they wanted to put out in the world means an enormous amount to me. And I have not been too happy with the live action remakes. But the reasons for those live action remakes not being great are a completely separate issue to what's going on now. There are some great deep dives into them. I love Lindsay Ellis's. I love a lot of people's. I highly suggest that you go check those out. It's not what I'm talking about here. We're not talking about dramaturgical concerns or writing or directing or anything like that. I sincerely hope that they have done a good job on this movie. If they haven't, I will be very upset. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about the writing. We're not talking about the directing. We haven't seen enough of anything to make any decisions about how we feel about that. And we probably won't until we see the film as a whole. This is specifically about Halle Bailey being cast as Ariel, and Halle Bailey is a Black actress. I think the thing that pushed me over the edge with wanting to speak about it was yesterday, it came to my attention that there is or was a Facebook group that is called Christians Against the Little Mermaid, Boycott Halle Bailey. Okay, now, first of all, there are some that claim that this is a fake Facebook group and account. I sincerely hope that that is the case. I would never, especially in this day and age with, things can be faked all the time. I would never want to definitively say that, oh yes, this 100% exists. However, in researching for this, I did do some due diligence and I found some evidence that this group did in fact exist. It still exists, just under a different name. From what I found, this group was originally created on July 9th, 2017 under the name Love, Compassion, and Understanding. The name was changed to Christians Against the Little Mermaid, Boycott Halle Bailey on July 4th, 2019. Then it was changed to Muhammad Ali Memorial on June 5th, 2019. Then it was changed to Boycott Super Bowl on January 24th, 2019. So allegedly, that is what this group is. I only say that because I certainly don't want to just be spouting things on the internet that are fake. Based on my due diligence, I think this is a thing that exists, which is all the more horrifying. If I'm wrong, I sincerely hope that I am. I'll be the first one to say so. But based on my research, this is a thing that has existed. Basically, the people that are against Halle Bailey being cast as Ariel in this film, a lot of them have tried to wrap up what, in all honesty, is blatant racism. um, up in a call that, well, this is a Danish fairy tale. The casting of her is disrespectful to the Danish people. It's erasing their history. It's erasing their culture. It's offensive to Danes because this is their fairy tale, and you're casting a Black woman in a Danish fairy tale. Okay, so this is one of the few, if only, times in my life that my identity actually gives me 100% authority to speak on the issue at hand. I'm a Christian. I'm a Dane. Um, I'm a cis white female person of Danish ancestry. I'm a huge fan of The Little Mermaid, and I am an expert on the history, mythology, and interpretation of fairy tales. I've written quite a lot about it. It's involved in a lot of my work. Um, so that intersectionality of aspects of my identity makes me the perfect person, because apparently I am the poor, put upon person that all these people are trying to defend by boycotting this movie. They're trying to protect me, from the injustices of this casting. So I would like to go on record publicly as a Christian, somebody of Danish descent, and a cis white straight woman who loves fairy tales and especially The Little Mermaid. I am 100% not offended by this casting. I think Halle Bailey is a phenomenal choice based on what I've seen. She looks lovely and delightful and a great choice in this role. Even if she weren't, my having any issues with her performance would have less than nothing to do with the fact that she is a Black actress. And for those of you who don't know, I have been dubbed the theatrical Hermione Granger. It's a very accurate term. And because of that, we are about to do a deep dive into why exactly I am not offended by the casting of Halle Bailey. Oh yes, I'm going there. So The Little Mermaid was written by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen in 1836 and published in 1837. Andersen is one of the famous triune of fairy tale authors. It's the Brothers Grimm, Charles Perrault, and Hans Christian Andersen. But what sets Andersen apart is that Andersen created all of his stories from scratch. The Grimm brothers and Perrault were, in different ways and for different reasons, trying to archive the folk tales of their respective cultures, albeit with some editing. That's a whole other deep dive. I wrote a show about it. We'll talk about that another time. But Andersen invented all of his stories himself from scratch. He didn't go around collecting fairy tales. He didn't go around transcribing stories from his culture. He made them up himself. Andersen was a bit of an odd duck, pun intended. He wrote The Ugly Duckling. There you go. Indeed, he was actually so socially awkward that people said that they would cross the street to avoid him. He had a really difficult childhood and growing up. His father died when he was very young. His mother got placed in a mental institution. And he really wanted to be a famous writer of operas. He wanted to write the librettos for operas. And so he managed to get himself to Copenhagen, which is the center of Denmark. And he wanted to write for operas. And he was just like laughed out of the place. Nobody thought what he was doing was good. They thought his silly fairy stories were idiotic. And it was only because one of the board members of the opera really took a shine to him and thought that he had talent and thought that he had something interesting, became his patron and supported him. And it's only because of that that Andersen became the famous writer that we know today. He happened to hit at the zeitgeist of when fairy tales were really, really popular. There was a period of time when their collection and telling was just at its peak. And so he hit right then. He got collections of his tales published. They became very, very popular, and he was very successful. His personal life, however, is definitely not a real life fairy tale. And his personal life was marked by two great unrequited loves. The first was for Jenny Lind, the famous opera singer. If you've seen The Greatest Showman, it's the same Jenny Lind, but she bears the real Jenny Lind bears literally no resemblance to her representation in The Greatest Showman. That's another deep dive for another day. Um, she did not reciprocate his love. He was really devastated. She even got her nickname the Swedish Nightingale because Hans Christian Andersen wrote his fairy tale, The Nightingale, for Jenny Lind. But the second unrequited love of his life was for the son of his patron, Edvard Collin. It's pretty clear that Hans Christian Andersen was either closeted gay man or closeted bi man, because he had a very deep unrequited love for Edvard. There are letters archived of that he wrote to Edvard. In one of his letters to Edvard, Andersen flat out said, "My sentiments for you are those of a woman." Not much debate there. There's a lot of evidence to support the fact that he was very, very, very much in love with this man. It's unclear whether Edvard Collin returned his affection or not, but all that we do know was that around 1836, Edvard announced that he was getting married to a woman. Andersen was heartbroken, and as a result, he wrote The Little Mermaid. And The Little Mermaid was a metaphoric expression of what he was experiencing at the time, with Andersen as the mermaid, Edvard as the prince, and the woman that Edvard was marrying as the princess. So the whole story was originally a metaphor to be the story of a man who couldn't be with someone because his love didn't conform to the world that he found himself in. That's how the story was originally written. So cut to Disney's Little Mermaid, which was selected by the great Howard Ashman as his first project for Disney. Ashman was himself a gay man who kept his HIV status a secret, even from his close collaborator, Alan Menken, for fear that if it got out, he would lose his job. He in fact didn't even tell Alan Menken that he was HIV positive until after the Oscars for The Little Mermaid, when it had gotten to the point where he couldn't keep it a secret anymore. He ultimately ended up dying of AIDS right before Beauty and the Beast was released and won a posthumous Oscar for Beauty and the Beast. Ashman is responsible not only for the lyrics of the Disney animated film of The Little Mermaid, but for much of the script, the entire concept, and let's just say the Disney Renaissance as a whole, all due to Ashman. And Ashman chose The Little Mermaid because he related to the character as an outsider who didn't fit into the world around him. And he knew of Andersen's connections to the story as being a metaphor for a gay man. Outside of that, there are lots of people in devout religious communities that have come out and said and written wonderful articles about the fact that The Little Mermaid was very important to them because they felt like it was a metaphor for religious conversion in order to marry somebody that you love if you're not both from the same religion. There are a lot of trans people who have shared that the story is incredibly meaningful for them as a metaphor for being trans. You know, the Little Mermaid literally feels like she's been born in the wrong body. There's a song in the Broadway version of The Little Mermaid. That's a whole other deep dive. The song's called The World Above, and it has the lyrics in it. It's like my life was wrong, and somehow now at last I'm in my own skin up here in the world above. So where is all this going? This is where it's going. The Little Mermaid, from its original inception, is so meaningful and it's so beloved because The Little Mermaid is a metaphor for anyone who has ever felt wrong or like they didn't belong. And that includes gay people, it includes trans people, it includes people of the wrong religion to marry the person they love, or somebody who's from a marginalized religion. And yes, it includes Black people. It includes everyone who has ever felt othered, whether by the world at large or even just in their own family. That's why it's such a powerful and important story. So with all that in mind, told you I was doing a Hermione Granger deep dive here. With all that in mind, let's break down the criticism of the upcoming 2023 live action remake. So this is how the character of the Little Mermaid is described in the original Anderson story. Her skin was as clear and delicate as a rose leaf, and her eyes as blue as the deepest sea. Okay, other than the fact that she has a fishtail, that is the only description of the character in the story. So let's get some things out of the way. For everybody who's saying that the character was originally written as white, no, technically she was not. The word white is never used to describe the character, not even the word pale. She is described as having blue eyes, but I don't see anybody up in arms that Halle Bailey isn't wearing contacts in the film. The animated movie gave the Little Mermaid red hair, which, though not canonically contradictory to the mermaid's description in the original story, is not a physical characteristic that's automatically associated with Danish people. They actually decided to make her a redhead because drawing or painting colors underwater for the animated film can be very tricky because there's a lot of shadow. Originally, actually, here's my Hermione Granger nose coming out. Originally, they were going to make the Little Mermaid blonde. There's an infamous story that the movie Splash had come out not that long before, and one of the Disney executives said, "Well, we all know mermaids are blonde," because of Daryl Hannah in that movie. But they quickly realized that blonde hair wasn't going to work very well underwater because when you start adding the shadows and things that happen when the character's moving underwater, it becomes not the prettiest shade. And red was something that worked very well when it was supposed to be painted underwater. It was a vibrant color. They could do this big contrast with the color of her tail. That's why she's a redhead. However, like I said, being redhead is not an automatic characteristic you associate with Danish people. Never heard anybody up in arms that Disney made the Little Mermaid Irish. Also, guess what? Black people have existed all over the world for a very, 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 very long time. There are Black Danish people. Yep, it's a thing. The Little Mermaid is not a story where ethnicity is important. I'm speaking as somebody for whom the Danish culture is very important and a part of my day-to-day life, as is the language, as are the people, as is the physical country. The Danish culture has nothing to do with this story. This isn't a case of taking, say, Mulan and whitewashing it. If you take the location and culture, although there's no cultural real signifiers, out of The Little Mermaid, it literally changes absolutely nothing. There have actually been some really interesting Russian and Eastern European live action film adaptations of the original Little Mermaid story. Um, I've never heard anybody up in arms that they made The Little Mermaid Eastern European. There only seems to be a problem, both in this instance with The Little Mermaid and with other such situations, when the character who was historically represented as being white is now no longer being played by a white person, but instead by a person of color. I've heard a lot of that wrapped up in the criticism that, Halle Bailey doesn't look like the animated character. Okay, I get nostalgia for a thing to a degree. We love the movie and the idea of like, oh, we can't wait to see like the movie in reality. But you know what? It's okay. And we can have lots of wonderful interpretations. And frankly, there's not really much of a point in making a live adaptation or any remake of a movie if you're just going to do the exact same thing again. But keeping something exactly like the animated movie to me is not an argument for anything to do with casting. I also really want to point out that the whole argument of, but they don't look like the character as they were in the previous movie or the book or whatever it is, exists with a lot of other casting decisions that people don't get nearly as up in arms about. For example, in Harry Potter, the fact that Harry's eyes are green is actually like a hugely significant plot point for the story. Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry, his eyes were not green in the movies. Um, no one cared. Same movie, Emma Watson did not have buck teeth. Hermione Granger having buck teeth is also a plot point in the stories. Nobody was up in arms that Hermione Granger didn't have buck teeth. As I said, this seems to be a trend specifically related to when a person of color steps into a role that a lot of people had been envisioning as white. Seems to make people a lot angrier than other things. Even in a situation like the Hunger Games, when the character of Rue in the movies was cast by a black actress, and in the books, Rue's skin color is described as, I don't have it in front of me, forgive me, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but her skin is described as being darker or olive skinned, or it's clear that she's not, lily white, and yet people were still really upset about that because as some people said that they had been envisioning Rue as white for some reason, and it made them angry that she wasn't. And getting even deeper into this, because I said I'm going there. Mermaids are a part of all cultures and countries. Trust me, I'm somebody who has researched this. Africa actually has a vast history of mermaid mythology, just as much as Western Europe does. Anderson was actually pulling specifically from mermaid and even more specifically siren mythology when he wrote the story. One of the things that was kind of revolutionary and very unique to people who were reading the story for the first time back in 1837 is traditionally sirens were most known, for the kind of role they played in stories like the Odyssey. Sirens were mermaids who sat on rocks and sang in beautiful voices specifically to lure sailors to their death. That's what they did. Gorgeous voices there to lure sailors to their death. That's the reason, one of the reasons why the Little Mermaid has such a beautiful voice. It's because that's one of the defining characteristics of mer people. That voice was there to lure sailors to their death. The fact that in the original story, the Little Mermaid not only doesn't want to kill humans, but actively saves a sailor goes contrary to everything in siren mythology. It automatically set her apart as somebody different, as somebody strange in her world. There were not stories of, sirens doing that. This was strange and it was antithetical to who she was. There is even, I believe, a moment in the original story where they talk about mermaids singing sailors down to the depths. So mythology surrounding mer people is very important. Do you know who else likes to get people out to deep water and kill them? The Mondeo in Zimbabwe, who are a variety of mermaids from African origin who have sharp teeth and pull people into deep water. It's a thing. There's a lot of history of mer people, as I said, all over the world. So canonically, they can be from anywhere. And I highly recommend you going and researching mermaid mythology. It's really interesting. It's really fascinating. There's a lot of great stories that people aren't necessarily in the zeitgeist in the way that things like The Little Mermaid are. But on top of that, guess what else? Disney's Little Mermaid was actually set in the Caribbean, which not only has a lot of African descent or people of African descent living there, but also has a long history with mermaid mythology. So the idea that mermaid mythology is singular to, I guess some would say, Denmark, but certainly Western Europe, is 100% false and not true. This is a story that can take place, if we're getting literal about it, can take place anywhere that there are stories about mermaids, which is anywhere. And along those lines, my next point, the Little Mermaid's a mythical creature. She can look however anybody wants her to look. And it really upsets me, the idea that it is more believable to people to have a creature that is half human, half fish, than that such a being is black. It's more believable to have a fishtail than to be black. Yeah. I've also heard some arguments that try to get scientific about it, about like if you lived, I don't even know what this argument is, but it's something along the lines of that if you really lived like deep in the ocean, you wouldn't have as much melanin in your skin. I don't even know how to respond to that. I'm sure there are some scientists out there that could weigh in on that statement. But again, suffice it to say, mer people have existed in every culture all over the world, and they are mythical beings. So you could even counter it by saying mermaids like to sit on rocks and sing, which would lead to getting suntanned, which would lead to their skin getting dark. I mean, there's like this. I don't even. I feel like I'm getting pulled into the depths of an argument that has no logic. And if you wanted to, you could like argue your way out of it. But like, what's the point? Ugh. And as my final mic drop for this moment, I know this is a long video, but I care very passionately about this. It's a final mic drop to there's another argument that, you know, black mermaids aren't canonical in a myriad of ways. I present to you Gabriella. Back in, I believe, the 90s, there was an animated TV show based around The Little Mermaid on Disney, Little Mermaid before The Little Mermaid took place. And one of Ariel's best friends is a mermaid named Gabriella, who is not only black, but is also deaf. So, in the expanded Disney Little Mermaid universe, black mermaids exist, folks. Here's the truth of what gets me the most, because yeah, it's fun to be intellectual and to counter those arguments and to talk about the history and the mythology and the intentions of writing it. And I love all those aspects of storytelling, but what gets me the most is how these people who purport to care so much about this story don't even seem to understand the story that they apparently love so much. And let's even set aside the Disney version for a second. The original Little Mermaid story by Hans Christian Andersen is my favorite story of all time. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's very dark. It's very different than most people know. So here's an important part of the story. So in the story, the mermaid, who does not have a name, that's why I keep calling her the mermaid or the Little Mermaid, she doesn't want to become human because she met this guy. In the mythology of the story, mer people don't have immortal souls. They live for 300 years, and then when they die, they turn into sea foam and cease to exist. And the reason that the mermaid is so fascinated with the human world is because humans have immortal souls and have the possibility of living forever. So that's why she's interested in the human world in the first place. The prince then sort of becomes a means to an end, because she finds out that if a human marries a mermaid, two become one and they share a soul, and then they have a chance to share an immortal soul. Part of the mermaid's deal is that she can stay a human until the morning after the prince marries somebody else, which he does. And not because the sea witch transformed, but because legitimately another princess comes along, he falls in love with her, and they get married. And the night of their wedding, the Little Mermaid knows that she's about to die and cease to exist and turn into sea foam. And her sisters show up out of the water, and they've traded their hair to the sea witch in exchange for a knife. that if the mermaid kills the prince and his blood splashes on her legs, she'll be able to go back to being a mermaid and she can go home and live her life just as it was before. And she gets very close to doing it. She's very, very, very close to doing it. And at the last minute, she can't do it because she loves the prince, she forgives the prince, and she sacrifices herself so that he won't die. And at the very end of the story, she doesn't turn into sea foam because of her love. She is given the opportunity to earn an immortal soul because she sacrificed herself and she loved so deeply that she put somebody else before herself. Um, for all the Christians out there, um, that is a metaphor for the Christian story of Christ. You know, theoretically, that's why we're Christians, is because we believe um, that God so loves us that he took on our sin and died in our stead so that we could be forgiven, even though we don't deserve it. That is the basis of the Christian religion. It's the basis of the Little Mermaid story. The whole point of the Little Mermaid is love and sacrificial love. And the idea that anybody purporting to call themselves a Christian would turn that into racist vitriol because they want a character to be white, let's just say it, is, I feel, is a slap in the face to the beliefs they purport to hold and to the story they're allegedly trying to maintain the integrity of. Um, I saw a video recently, I'll try to put up a little clip of it, of Black children, especially young Black girls, watching this new trailer that featured Halle Bailey as Ariel. And I don't know how you can watch this video and not be moved. These little girls' eyes suddenly get wide and they smile, and there's this look of just overwhelming awe. And they say things like, "Mommy, she looks like me. Is that real? That can't be right. Is that real? She looks like me. I'm Ariel." Like, oh my gosh. I know, as I think pretty much everyone in this world who's not a straight cis white man knows what it's like to not see yourself represented. Um, since time immemorial, Black people have had to imagine themselves into white roles, and women into male roles, gay people into straight roles, trans people into cis roles. Um, that's it's what happens. It's what we do because you have to find metaphoric representation when it's not literal. And the idea that you can't identify with a character who doesn't look like you, the idea that, like, as a white person, I would not be able to relate to a role being played by a Black performer is so insulting to us as the human race. Um, I know what it is to identify with lots of different types of roles that are very different from me. And I also know what it's like to suddenly see yourself represented and the power in that. And the way that makes you feel not alone, and that you're seen and that you can do things you never thought that you could do. Um, you know, if I can imagine myself into a male character or a gay character, or a trans character, or a black character, or an Asian character. The I don't understand what the problem is of having of identifying with and relating to a character that is other than yourself. Um, and I don't understand the desire to deny underrepresented people the ability to see themselves represented. Frankly, I would like any Christian who has an issue with Halle Bailey being cast to watch that video of the reaction of those little black girls and then look me in the eye and tell me why such amazing children of God should be denied that beautiful experience. And I think that maybe that's the question that we should be taking a look at and asking ourselves. Because the point of Christianity is love. And the point of The Little Mermaid is love and inclusion. And I don't know. I wish I had some really great thing to say that could silence this argument once and for all, or speak to the people who are making it. But I don't know. I guess I sort of felt like because I am the demographic that allegedly is being the most injured by this casting decision, that I had a responsibility to speak out and say something about it. And I think, especially right now, we need to all be offering our immense support to Halle Bailey. This is a unbelievably brave young woman who is shouldering an incredible burden to bring this story to those who have wanted for a very long time to feel a part of this world. And it is the antithesis of love thy neighbor and the antithesis of the message of The Little Mermaid to be sending such hatred toward a beautiful, brave, talented, I don't know her personally, but she seems very kind and lovely young woman. I can't imagine anybody, but especially somebody at her age, who I know she's obviously done amazing things in the industry, but I think The Little Mermaid, most people would probably say, is like the biggest break yet in her career. Um, that happens, that miracle happens for you. And if you were to ever go and Google yourself, the first things that would come up are just hatred and vitriol because of the color of your skin. It's 2022, folks. Like, I would have hoped that we would have evolved past this. But as the voice of the people who are supposedly being defended by this stance, I don't feel defended at all. I feel insulted. I feel embarrassed. Um, and I wish everybody would just stop. I'm sure there will be many things to talk about this film when it comes out. Like I said, if it goes the way of other Disney remakes, which I hope it doesn't, there will be a lot of things that I'm maybe not super excited about this film. But Halle Bailey and the color of her skin is 100% not one of them. So I would encourage everybody to go read the original story. Um, I'd encourage any Christians who feel this way to think about the fact that, there's been another historic change in someone's race in artistic depictions, and that would be the fact that Jesus was not a white man. um, and to think about all of those things and maybe help us be kinder and more inclusive and more loving. And frankly, those beautiful Black children who felt seen and included and so happy. I would far prefer that to any quote unquote, recreation of an original in terms of casting or whatnot. Like I would sacrifice a lot of artistic things, if they even are artistic merits at all, which they're not. But for them to have that experience, and I think that that's what art is for. The reason that I'm a storyteller and I'm an artist is to hopefully give those kinds of meaningful experiences to people. And maybe we should be thinking about how we can do that more and how we can be more supportive and more inclusive. But I don't know. I guess if nothing else, maybe let's all go flood Halle Bailey's social media with love and support, because she is risking a lot and carrying a lot on her shoulders to help all of us, and especially her community, and especially the community of Black people in this country, to feel loved and included. So maybe we can send her some love and inclusion, because I think she deserves it.
Mermaids like to sing, do their underwater dance, and lure sailors to their death if we're given half a chance. Sing and dance and murder, that's what we like to do. But we also rescue maidens, and we're here to rescue you. So come on down and join us, enjoy the lovely view. Life's lovely when you're bobbing along in the beautiful, bright